to now the third mental model. It's called circle of competence. So some places you might be familiar with, like in terms of knowledge of what you're aware of, or you might be aware of like the territory, but there might be certain situations where you may not be so familiar with. And the reason why you might be, it's like specific knowledge that you have. So you may have mastered this through like hours and hours of research, hours of practice that you may have done, and hard work that you've done, that it's in your circle of competence. The circle of competence is like your strength of like what you know really well. And it's important to be, obviously, you know, where your circle of competence is, so you can move around confidently, but it's also very important to know what is outside of your circle of competence, which is like things that you may not know. Because if you're trying to operate in an environment confidently where it's not your domain of strength, then like you're sort of being ignorant. Because you should also learn about, like you should also learn more about what you don't know, and like defining what is it that you don't know and find out the answers for that. Because it's very dangerous to operate trying to pretend you know everything when you actually don't know anything. So like an example I can give is like a mechanic under, like, you know, if they're under a car hood, they would feel at home because they know everything about a car. Whereas if you just throw them in like a kitchen, they'd probably have no clue with like what to cook, or like how ingredients and all these types of things go together to create flavors and all that thing, all of those. So that's what circle of competence is.
That's a really interesting one. I think that one resonates a lot with people. And the reason I say that is because there's a level of confidence that you should have to your knowledge, but there's also a level of ignorance that you shouldn't have towards what you don't know. And what I mean by that is, it's very hard for people to sometimes admit that I don't know. Like those 3 words, I actually don't know, is such a hard thing to say for some people. But there's a reason why people are specialized in their own field, in different fields. And you need to be able to really understand. If you really want to learn from those fields, you have to ask the right questions and really put yourself out of your comfort zone to learn. Because like learning is exponential. It's very infinite, right? Like you can't put a limit or a stop to learning. You're always learning. But I think people are so afraid to ask for help at times, or afraid to actually learn because they think they know it. And that's just from that, it doesn't lead you anywhere. Like from my experience, it's always been, you always have to have an open mind to learning from different people. Even if that person is, you think that person, they're at your level, you can really walk away from that conversation or whatever it is, becoming a better person. So that's an interesting one. In circle of competence, is it more like, I know Richard Branson does this quite well. And I've seen like, he started like Virgin Voyage, which is like a cruise ship, or something along those lines. I think I might be butchering the explanation of this, but he's gone through space, started Virgin Space, airlines, etc. Now he started Virgin Voyage, which is focused on cruise ships. And he has no clue about cruise ships, but he actually hired, I think, the chief operating officer at Carnival Cruises. Because who knows better than cruises than the CEO at Carnival Cruises, right? Hired him. It's like, hey, let's do it, sort of thing. It's like, he didn't go into it with, I know it, I'm going to do it, whatever. It's like, hey, I don't know it. This guy knows it. I have capital. I know how to run a business overall. I know the strings I need to pull, but I don't know how to operate a cruise ship. But he does. So sometimes it's like, it's a bit like Breaking Bad. I don't know if you've seen that show.
I've seen parts of it, but
it's like, this is like the worst analogy you could use, but it's like cooking methamphetamine and distributing it. And I mean, don't ever do that, guys. Like, full disclaimer. But it's like Walter White says, like, you know the business and I know the chemistry. Right? It's like, you know how to sell the product. I know how to make the product. Because sometimes, like, And that's like the worst analogy I could have used. But it's also like, let's look at a restaurant. You have people that are specialized in, you know, customer service, waiting tables, etc. And then you have people that are very specialized at creating the food. If you take those two, one or the other away, that's it. So a restaurant owner actually needs all of it. A restaurant owner can't do it by themselves. I think it's also trusting people to do, like trusting people, and also really, before you get into understanding what value they can also bring is important.
Yeah, that's really that's really well put actually, because like I think going like back to the point that you're talking about where you have to ask questions as well. I think it takes humility. Like people think like I think we try and inflate our egos to the point we think like we pretend we know everything, but if you just have a bit of humility, it can get you a lot further than where you are. To be honest, just asking the questions. I had to put myself in situations where I had a lot of humility, like to learn. But as a result, now it makes a lot more sense to me, especially in tech. Like when you're thrown in, there's like this whole imposter syndrome and all these types of things, or I would say like superiority, where you try and put like this persona of like you knowing everything, because that's what everyone thinks. Like, you know, a software engineer, whatever. Like you have to know it all, but the reality is you have to actually, the more humility you have, the more you're going to learn and grow. So I think that's like a very important quality to have, like humility to know where your weaknesses are, and also like to ask the right questions, as you said, to learn. And it's a really good how you put like the restaurant owner has to have different types of people specialize in different areas. That's what makes a good leader. Leader isn't, I think what makes a good leadership, from what I've seen, like observation, is knowing the strengths and weaknesses of your team. Because then you don't just forcefully put someone who's not competent in some skill in a position that you know where their strengths are, and you allocate them that task, and you delegate the parts that you may not be strong at to someone else. And that's why I think a good leader has humility as well, because it takes humility to also understand your own weaknesses and be honest with it, to then delegate that task to someone else who will be better at it than you. And I also think like when I think about it with Edison and Nikola Tesla, I'm not sure if you know much about their stories.
Not entirely.
Basically, I think Edison created Westinghouse, like a very profitable company based on electricity. But Nikola Tesla was the guy who originally came up with like ideas of like electricity, like with electricity and everything. And he wanted it to be in such a way where it would be free for everyone. You don't have to pay for anything. And he always had the greatest ideas, but Edison knew how to market it. And that was the difference. And I just think back and I think if both of them worked together, they would have been like a multi-billion-dollar company. Like Edison was very successful because he knew how to market and do business. But the idea person at the end of the day was Nikola Tesla. And I just think back and I'm like thinking, man, if they both were together, just collaborating, like they would have been an amazing company to this day. Like even bigger than Westinghouse, or like what it is to this day.
I mean, if we look at it though, Tesla probably stuck true to his values as well. So he's very authentic in what he wanted for humanity.
That's true.
You know, so I think it's interesting because yeah, you're right. I think when you put two brains, if you put two people aligned with the same values, same objective, that's why it's so important to have aligned objectives. Right? If you're running a business or whatever it is, your values need to align and your objectives need to align. If you have one guy that's all for, you know, non-profit, more focused on the humanity aspect of making it accessible for everyone, not placing restrictions, not making money, but taking that view, you can't work with someone that's more view is on commercializing it, you know, ways to market it so that it becomes a bit of a profitable business. But it's interesting because people will say, oh, Tesla should have taken that deal or whatever it was if it was offered. But sometimes, you know, like no amount of money or wealth or whatever at times can actually compromise your values.
Yeah, that's real well put. Said I think like it's very important to have like aligned values and things.
I
But
just want to say about the leadership. I think humility, like some of the best leaders I've worked with, incredible human beings, have said, I actually don't know. And they've said it so openly without like, they don't look, it's not like, oh, I'm a title of this, therefore I should know this. It was literally honesty, like, I actually don't know how to approach it. But, let's sit together and sort of invert the problem, and let's sort of figure it out together. It's like that. Someone that actually like resonates from your, like looks at it from your perspective as well, which makes an incredible leader, is, these a level of, these are level of expectations that they have, or, these are level of competence that you should have. But for them to admit that they may not be competent, but that's okay. Figure it out together. It's such a powerful thing.
yeah, definitely. And I would, as I said, like I have the same experience as well. Like that humility in a leader really brings out. Like it also builds the character. It also makes it more. It makes the team a lot more productive as well. Instead of pretending to try and solve problem based on what you know and pretend that like you have the solution. So that's why it's like being very aware of your ego. It's very important because that's where I think circle of competence can be compromised because you try and, as I said, right, if you try and operate in what you don't, in an area you don't know, and you're trying to pretend to maintain this persona or something, and you actually end up creating more problems. Whereas if you just operated in your strengths and you just delegated that task of what you don't know and you learned as a result, that would be a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, a lot more productive for the entire team. So yeah, that's basically circle of competence.
That's a really good one. I think, yeah, really well put. Yeah, that's a big one. That's a huge one. I think from what I've based on our conversations of inversion, and that one is just French kiss, chef's kiss, French kiss, chef's kiss. Got that wrong.
Yeah, so and I liked how you brought that as well because the last one I'll talk about is called lattice or mental models.
Say it again, sorry.
So it's called LatticeWork. So lattice is like
LatticeWork, okay.
very strong structure. It's like it comes from like a science. Like when you look at a lattice model of like a particles and like a solid, like there's a lot of particles that are connected together and like strongly joined and things like that. That's what lattice means. And so when it comes to mental models, it's like the idea behind it, Charlie Munger would emphasize this, is like if you have a bunch of mental models, then it creates a very strong framework and a strong framework for critically thinking of solving very complicated problems. So he was emphasizing and how like and you know how we talked about the map is not the territory. You know how there's like limitations and weaknesses. Well, if you combine different mental models, it makes up for those weaknesses in a way. So like, and I can't really think of like a maybe yeah. Let's just say inversion and circle of competence, like areas of where you lack. Like if you look at yourself, you analyze yourself, and you just be like, what are my strengths? And then you say, okay, let's flip it. Like where is it that I lack like knowledge, or where is it that I'm weak at? And then you just be like, okay, this is where now who do I know that has this domain of knowledge and strength that I can learn from? So that's like you applied inversion because you're thinking of like where is it that you don't know, what you don't know. So you flip that problem of your strengths. Now you know your strengths and your weaknesses. Then you also used circle of competence to identify who's strong at that area. So it's like you almost combine both of those together to then now you've become more of like you know more of yourself, more authentic with what your strength is. You're not putting on some ego, and you're also using you're having people that will be able to help you in that situation circumstance to get to a desired outcome.
Your weakness is your strength.
Oh, yeah, identifying your weaknesses. Yeah.
At that point, your weakness becomes a strength. That's probably the way I'd put it.
Yeah, true.
Is at a high level, is your weakness is your strength at that point. Because you're right, everyone has a weakness. It's more so what are you doing about it? And once you actually invert that, it's like, oh, this will one day become a strength. I think being self-reflective and understanding what your weaknesses are, what your gaps are, what you could do better is so important. Fortunately, there's a lot of perception of reality, like people living a fake perception of reality actually lack the disdain to self-reflect at times.
Yeah, it's just, I think it's just also like, I think it's also part of it if we really were to look at it as well. I think it's like the culture of the like the culture of the environment. Like a lot of people try and maintain images and personas that they're like some sort of big boss or like some perfectionist when they that and then I think that just and when someone witnesses that type of behavior, then they also follow that as well. Like an example I can give is like, say for instance, right? I I didn't do this, but I'm just saying, like I was there was like a meeting that came up for work, right? Hypothetically saying, or like a meeting that came up, I had to go, and there's like a junior developer or something, and I just said, oh, like can you just say that I'm just running late, like as in, oh, I'm running late because my mom's sick or something, and yeah, just let them know that I'm gonna be late because my mom's sick. But that wasn't actually true. I just said a lie. Now that junior developer is gonna be like, oh, so he's a senior, he can lie, so then I can do that too. It's just like, now what you've done without realizing is you've created in the culture, you've introduced like, lying is okay, even when you're in a senior position, things like that. Whereas if you're just authentic and said like, just tell them I'm going to be late, and I'll just let them know, and I'll give them my reason of why I was late, just being honest. Then now that junior would now also operate on honesty because they follow the footsteps of someone who's above them, right? So that, and you, because you're trying to protect this image of you trying to be this perfect senior or something, you've introduced, if you operate on just like inauthenticity, you've introduced that culture in the workplace.
Yeah.
So it's very important, you be honest and authentic and things like that as well, because that can affect the workplace culture and everything.
I 100% agree. I never thought of it that way until I actually had really good leaders. And you actually, I mean, being young, I think one thing that really resonates with young people is we want to work with a leader that we respect. I mean, that's everyone, right? But I think for something with Gen Z like us, I think we're a bit more bold compared to other generations and how they view leadership. And I think we're a bit more chirpy. We stand up for ourselves a bit more. We tend to think we know more than people than we do. And I mean, it's this isn't even like, I'm not even calling out specific people. This is overall, I think we can be like that. I'm like that at times as well, 100%. At times I'm a little like, I overstepped the boundary when I probably shouldn't, right? And it's not a bad thing. It's like, but we tend to have a bit more confidence. And it's a bit like, hey, you can't really, it's like a, sort of like a 15, 16-year-old, like, oh, you're better than, like, I know it all. Don't even try to educate me on this, blah, blah, blah. Like there are times where, you sort of, I will say like we're just a bit more bold to put it very frankly. But I think for us, a leader is such a special, not a special thing, I would say, but someone that we sort of look up to in a way. And you're right. Like if your leaders, and I didn't realize how important it was until my leaders would embody good behavior. And it's like, oh, like this is what I have to do. Because by them embodying a good behavior, you can see the branding and how they're perceived in the business or wherever they're regarded very highly. And it's very motivating when you're like, oh, well, he's regarded very highly. What is he doing? What is he doing differently? And you start to sort of mirror that body language, mirror that thought process, how they operate. But I also think like you should also be a version of your own self, right? It's so important because I think times we try to embody someone that we're not, and that doesn't work. You have to be who you are. So if you're someone that's very humorous, you like to joke around a bit, you should still be that person. that shouldn't change who you are in any environment. But you should know the boundaries of what you can and can't really say at times as well, right? If you've got someone that's an executive, you're not going to make a really crude joke, right, that you would do with the boys. But that doesn't stop you from making a dad joke. You know what I mean? Like, if you have to. But that's what it is, the authenticity side of it, right? Like, there's so many aspects to it, but you can see who's authentic and who's not.
Yeah. So, and it just made me randomly think when you said like what you can say, what you don't say. It's like, oh, circle of boundaries. What you shouldn't say, what you should say. It's like, you know, that circle of competence we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's like applicable now across different planes as well.
Yeah.
Like, or what you shouldn't say, what you should say, like things like that. Like, I'm just trying to say like how it's applicable in different contexts as well.
You got to be
yeah,
very careful
very
how you
careful.
say things at times, though. Like, I think people, and I've learned this the hard way, like sometimes being carried away through emotions and you can come off wrong. But it's very important to just stay grounded and just think like, if I say this, is it going to achieve anything?
That's, yeah, and there's a consequences as well. And there's consequences to that. And I'll go over it next time, like the next mental model, which you can stay tuned for.
Nice.